And this is a nice picture, a nice micrograph of the zooxanthellae within the coral tentacle. We see the hunting part with the cnidocytes all lined up at the top, at the surface, and we see these little tiny symbiotes that are like an algae that's growing within the mesoglia of the Cnidarian tentacle, and they can live within the whole body of the tentacle as well. And uh, they give the coral their color. Okay, to illustrate how zooxanthellae work, we're going to use a terrestrial example that you can understand a little more, maybe because you're familiar with terrestrial systems. Okay, we're growing grass on a paddock, and if we're a farmer, we want to feed that grass to the cows. We want the growth to be very high for our grass, so we're going to add nutrients. We might add fertilizers like nitrogen and phosphorus to the paddock, and then sunlight needs to come in, right? There's the sunlight and CO2. Oops, there we go. CO2, and all those things go into and the grass can use them to photosynthesize and make glucose and other sugars and carbohydrates. So the grass grows and produces some things that are outputs. So output will be O2, oxygen, we know photosynthesis, and sugars, okay? And that is something that's usable energy for an animal. And the cow comes along and eats that. So what's the cow going to do? Let's make the cow red. Okay, so we've got a red cow. There we go. Okay, looks more like a pig. Anyway, the pig's going to eat grass. So the pig's going to actually intake that oxygen and the sugars and also provide CO2. And when it wheezes or poos, it's providing nutrients. And so this system is the system that we know, and it goes round and round with the primary producers producing oxygen and food, and the things that eat those, the consumers, winding up releasing the nutrients back into the environment and the carbon dioxide, so that the sunlight can be used, and round it goes. Okay, the same thing happens. Oh, whoops. Well, the same thing happens with zooxanthellae. So the same thing happens with the zooxanthellae. Here they are, lined up near the surface of the polyp, and that is a really nice place for something that wants to stay in the photic zone to live. So what happens is it keeps those organisms from sinking out into the depths, or being washed away from where the sunlight is. They can stay in this area up near the surface because they're protected from being washed away. They're also protected from being grazed or filter fed out, and in return, they also get the waste products of the cells from the coral polyp. That is an animal, and it's weeing and pooing just like any other animal does, and those waste products can be used, and especially in the tropics, the waters are notoriously nutrient poor. So the zooxanthellae then provide extra carbohydrates, sugars, and other things for the use of the coral polyp to carry on its metabolism. So it's a nice relationship where they both get a little something out of it, and that's called symbiosis. All right, and this is a recount. We've probably also heard something about coral bleaching. I'm sure you've heard the term coral bleaching before. And coral bleaching can happen from stress from pollution, water temperatures, low or high nutrient levels, and that is something that can cause the death of coral. Doesn't necessarily cause the death of coral. So what happens is this zooxanthellae coral symbiotic relationship is thrown out of balance, and the zooxanthellae are actually expelled from the coral tissues. So the coral freaks out and somehow chemically sort of pushes the zooxanthellae out, which would be uh, possible evolutionary reasons would be to be able to expel something that is not a benefit that's living within your tissues. Anyway, the coral initially they become a brilliant white, and then that doesn't mean that the coral, once it's bleached, is necessarily dead. But since they rely on the zooxanthellae for so much of their nutrition, they uh, can starve to death if they are not re-inoculated with zooxanthellae. This is a nice picture of a part of the coral polyp that's been bleached and a part of the coral polyp that still has its zooxanthellae in it. So that will possibly die, but not necessarily. Reproduction in Scleractinaria is both sexual and asexual. Sexual reproduction, they have mass spawning, and I'll put a link to a YouTube video up for you to be able to see the eggs and sperm all being released at once on a barrier on the Great Barrier Reef. And then the free swimming larvae transported long distances by currents and settle when they on new coral atolls or and maybe even the same one but with further away from their parent colonies, which means that they're not competing with their parent colonies. And then also asexually, they could bud new polyps and grow the colony that way. So that is the end of the last video for Cnidaria, and we'll see you with Platyhelminthes.